Welcome to Mastering Your World Through Frequencies. In this episode, there's an introduction, an interview, and most importantly, at the end, a group frequency calibration where the frequency work happens and change is catalyzed. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. This is Karen Cheong, and I'm here with my co-host, Tia Sims. Many of us want to achieve goals, succeed, and just generally go further faster. But within this type of upward trajectory, or in any cycle of growth really, there's a super important space between levels that few talk about or are even aware of. Resisting these spaces when they arise causes stalling and prevents growth. Today we'll be discussing these in-between spaces, the death space and the void. We'll talk about what they are, why they're important, what to expect, and how to make the most out of them when you find yourself there. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part of this episode. The group frequency calibration at the end is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. So let's get going. Tia?
So, Karen, before we dive in, can you answer what is the death space?
Yeah. So, it's funny. That name probably will freak some people out because anything with the word death in it seems to freak people out. However, in every cycle, there is like a life portion and then a death portion, right? A time, even in nature, where things, like a tree, for example, will grow. Right? It's a seed, and then a sapling grows, becomes a big tree, at some point falls over because it's dead, and then nourishes the earth, more saplings come, right? So it's the part of a natural cycle of life. So the death space is my name for the space in between jumps in consciousness. And for some, it doesn't have to be like huge jumps in consciousness. It just is, for us as humans, little ones. Okay, so as we rise through different levels of consciousness, we'll often go through what I call the death space. So what does that mean? It means that it's a space that is a fragment of the void. Okay, so the void, just so that everyone understands what that is a spectacular place. And the void is between all the different layers of consciousness. Okay, so whether you're going from this level of consciousness into the new consciousness and above, between this level of consciousness, there are sub-levels of consciousness. And in between all those layers is the void. And the void is very, very feminine. And it's a place of absolute nothing and absolute potential. It is where form comes from. Okay, it is the energy or the potential of everything that is yet to come into form. So when, the physicists or scientists, whatever, will say, like, almost everything is nothing, right? It's like 99.99999% nothing, and the rest is matter. The nothing isn't nothing. It's the void. It's potential. It's the yet to be created into form. And that's why, in part, the universe keeps expanding. Form keeps expanding infinitely into the void. The death space is like a fragment of the void. Does that make sense? It's like a part of it. So it's kind of like you'll get to a certain point in your frequency resonance, and then you'll hit this point. Not everybody will, okay, but many will. So that's why we're talking about this, because if you don't know what it is and you get into it, you're just like, what the heck is going on? So it's a space where it is like a bit of a death space. So where everything, so what is it? What is death? To me, death is dissolution. Okay, it's the dissolving of something, right? So that it can come into something else. That's what the death space is to me. So you'll get to a point in your frequency resonance where all of a sudden you'll experience nothingness. So it doesn't matter how much you try to do. It doesn't matter how much work you plan, how much you try to create, how many relationships you try to nurture. In this space, it'll dissolve. And meaning, like, nothing will move forward. It's just like you're in this space where you're just like, whoa, nothing's happening. It doesn't matter how much you try. It's nothing. So it's like, the first time I ever went into a death space, it kind of freaked me out because I'm a doer, right? So I'm just like, I have all these plans, I have my list, I have my calendar, I got it all sorted. It's going, you know what I mean? And then I hit the death space and I was like, Wait a minute. What's going on? So, like, at the time, we were realtors in San Francisco. So, like, clients would disappear. Deals would come to a stop. Like, disappear, meaning, like, people who were talking to, right? We're going to list your home.
They stopped talking.
They stopped talking to me.
Yeah.
Right? Or, like, people who were thinking about buying a home.
Everything went on pause.
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
Everything just stopped. Like, people, like, we would try to make plans with friends, and they would be away because something happened in their families, or they were busy, or they just nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? Everything dissolved, and we couldn't do anything if we wanted to because there was nothing to do. Like everything was just like halt.
Like
yeah. So in the space of nothing, okay, or the death space, right, which is like a little sliver of void. In that space, there's so much opportunity if we approach it correctly. So if you did it the way I did it, okay. There's very little opportunity.
You're like, no, I'm forcing
my
something.
way. Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna make my way through because I didn't know what it was,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, I just tried harder, right? I was like, I'm gonna throw more at it. I'm gonna do more. I'm gonna work more hours, and it was so exhausting because the death space is like kind of like the winter. You're meant to like be still, to nourish, to like this is a cycle where you're meant to release things. But here I was trying to power through. And it took a tremendous amount of effort. I managed to force my way out of the death space, okay? Some things started to happen like very incrementally, but it took so much effort. I was so exhausted. And then I wasn't done with the death space, so I just pinged back into it. I was like, oh God.
That literally does sound like the winter season for people.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, I do 5-element acupuncture. So I see, even for myself, it's really hard to like slow down, rest, recharge, build your reserves. So that the springtime you can, boom, bust forth.
Bust forth and grow.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Have energy to do that.
Yeah.
So it's similar, right? Because winter is like the natural cycle of the death space. And so anyhow, all right. So here's my advice to you, having done it. I did it twice actually, because I apparently am a slow learner. I was like, okay, I'm just going to muscle my way through again. Anyway, so I'm just going to tell you right now, the best way to approach that space, okay, having done it not efficiently the first 2 times, is to stop, okay, to actually be in surrender, because it's a place of absolute potential and absolute nothing. Because you're tapping into the void to some degree, right, when you're in the death space. So it's a place where you can release a tremendous amount if you allow yourself to, if you're not charging around trying to do all this stuff like I was, to be in that space of stillness, to allow it. And the thing is, the death space, no one can force you out of the death space. So no matter what you do, it's you or someone else, you're going to be in it as long as you need to be in it. Like your higher self is like, you're going to be in this death space to release what you need to until you're out of it. So that's just the end of it. Okay. So when I'm working with clients and they're in the death space, I'm like, whoa, you're in the death space. Like, okay, so we're going to work around it, but I'm not hastening you out of, I can't push them because they're in that space to release and purge more. Right? So if you've tried to force them out, like me as the person who's doing the frequency work, it's like against their will in a way. Do you see?
Yeah.
Because they're doing a very important function.
Yeah.
So I can't just be like, hui!
Yeah. You want to honor that space.
Yeah. So they can do the purging they need to. So it may feel scary. What I would suggest is to this is an opportunity to learn to surrender, to do like the surrender frequency work, which is what I had to do, right? To get to a point where I could release more. And there's a kind of a beauty in it too. In the winter, there is beauty in the sense of the stillness of it.
Oh, yeah.
If you can allow yourself to slow down enough, there's like a pleasurableness in it. And what I'll say about the death space, it's like everything doesn't touch you. So it's like you have this like huge buffer between you and everything else. So it's like you're super neutral. It's not normal in the sense like when you're in life, right? You can feel things, you're aware of stuff. Like even if it doesn't like push you off your center, you're more aware. In the death space, it's like huge neutrality, like more than normal. So it's like people are talking to you and you're like, that doesn't matter. Not in an apathetic way, but it's like, wow, in the grand scheme of things, like, wow, that just doesn't matter.
So it's a beautiful space
of
rest and release. Now, question, does one have to be detoxing in the death space for the release? Does that mean if you're in a death space, then you are detoxing, or
not
one can exist without?
Yeah, one can exist without the other.
Okay.
So a lot of people will, thank you for that question, because a lot of people will confuse detox for death space.
Okay.
I'm like, that's not necessarily the same.
No.
You could just be like releasing stuff and kind of going through it.
Yeah.
That's detox. The death space can have an element of detox, but then it will just go into stillness.
Where it's just
nothing.
So then how is it releasing when it's also still?
Because you're so deeply in it, you're not like as aware of it as a human. Like all the emotional stuff, the physical stuff, like, you know, the stuff that like makes us like, bleh,
yeah,
right? So you're aware that it's happening, but it doesn't affect you in the same way. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're just more neutral. Like I said, it's like a really like a heightened, elevated neutrality that is very different. So you might be like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm purging whatever. So you have clarity, but you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to release that. It's really odd, but it's really very cool. Yeah. And you realize, okay, well, I'm not releasing that very well, so I'm just going to have to be a little bit more still. And it just sort of like comes out because you're not resisting it. Yeah. Right? So it just releases and you're like, wow, that's kind of cool.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's really a gift. It is a
totally.
gift.
Yeah.
And you can't plan it. It just kind of happens.
And you can't make it happen.
Wow.
It just happens. That's what I'm saying. It just, and some of you will experience the death space more than others. Those of you who are have more issues with control probably will be forced into it a little bit more because it's just like well, if you want to learn surrender, you're going to be put in the death space. Yeah, that happens a lot. Really, like I said, it is a gift if you're approaching it in the right way. You know, if you're just soft with it and allow yourself to go into more surrender, it will really, really, like honestly, enhance surrender like nobody's business, right?
And then you come out of it almost richer.
Totally richer.
Yeah, I must say this is what just happened to me, and that's why I'm smiling over here. I'm like, oh, this is funny. For listeners who need some context, like you know, we had a camping trip planned, and after the camping trip, it was like the thing we were going to go to got canceled, and then the next day that thing got canceled. So we really were forced into just stillness, and then we were waiting to hear about two really big things about a land we might be buying and whatnot, and everything just paused. Yeah. So that's exactly what was happening. Yeah. And it was hard for me at first. I'm also a doer, right? And I'm realizing, it was like, it's ended now, that space, and I feel like it really impacted me permanently. Yeah. Like now I'm like, oh, there is an importance to slowing down sometimes and allowing that to happen.
Totally. And what will happen is that your frequency resonance will buoy. So as you come out of it, so as you said, as we've talked about, right, you can't force it. Yeah. All of a sudden, things will just start to happen. Like things will just start to gel.
And that's exactly
when you know. You know, you're just like, oh, I guess I'm out of the death space now.
So
right? Yeah, right? And you're just like, and it happens like really fast when you come out of the death space. But you have to, but if you resist the death space, man, you're going to be in that puppy for a long time. Yeah. And if you do what I did, okay, learn from me, don't do that. You're going to get pushed back into it because you're going to go through it. If your higher self is like, you need to learn to surrender more, like you're going to go through it, you're going through it. Yeah. So it doesn't matter who you're talking to. So my suggestion is to not fight that because you probably will not win from your little ego-minded self. And you're kind of not getting the most out of it, right? Which is a deeper sense of surrender, of enjoyment of this stillness. And then when you come out of it, you feel, like you said, this richness and this buoyancy because you've been in that deep, deep, deep stillness. Right? It's like more, it's like you've learned that whole cycle, right? That you've like, it's like almost the space where you have had all that experience, have internalized it. It's like left you whatever you need to take from it has, but it like integrates all that somehow. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then you come out of it and you're like, everything just starts to line up and happen. You're like, ding, 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 ding. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah, this is bizarre because that's exactly correct. It's funny the timing that we're talking about this. Yeah. Very neat. Very neat.
So the death space is really cool. And like I said, the reason we're talking about it is just so that people who are in it aren't fighting it. Yeah. And you know what it is. And that it is different from detox. Very, very different. Most people who are just beginning will not go into the death space. Okay. So just for you guys to know, so if you're just starting and you're kind of like, oh my God, that doesn't sound great to me. You have to actually get to a certain level of frequency resonance to have it. Not because we're special, but because in order to learn surrender, you have to have cleared enough of your distortion. You know what I mean? Because if at the beginning, you're just like trying to get rid of the distortion patterns.
There's no room for that yet. Yeah,
exactly. So then when you've finally gotten rid of enough of them and you're stable enough internally, then you can surrender, right? And you're like, oh, okay. So now, and that's when the death space sort of magically appears, of course, in perfect timing.
So crazy.
Yeah. So that's the space, what I call the space in between. It's a space between, even if it's like on the infinite scale, it seems tiny, you know, in these little bumps in consciousness or little bumps in frequency resonance. The death space is in between. It's like all these little layers between the movement of this upward buoyancy, you know? And it is, like I said, a part of the void, which is a very feminine space, which is that of like ultimate dissolution and ultimate, and then also like possibility. So, yeah. So anyway, that's the death space.
Beautiful. It's resting, releasing, relaxing, and enriching at the same time.
Totally. And during this period, what I would recommend is to know that it's happening. It's less scary if you know that's what's happening. To take care of yourself. I know we've talked about self-care a lot, but
especially
this. To not lose presence in your body. So just like take care of your body, right? Your body's trying to like process a lot here and just be. So just allow facilitating that. And then it's funny because I find that in the death space, things become clearer. You know, it's like, because you don't have all that emotional stuff and mental you know what I mean? It's like, it's more quiet.
Right.
Because you don't have that as intensively. So you can, it gives you this odd clarity. That neutrality gives you a weirdly odd clarity. So you can sort of see things like, oh, actually, this isn't serving me, or this is, or it would be better to go here, or whatever. And you're not forcing it, you're just noticing it. And so that can be a really beautiful gift from the death space as well.
Very cool. Yeah, it's like a good reminder and emphasizing the point that just because you're not doing doesn't mean that nothing's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge reminder with this space.
Totally. It's kind of like a tree, you know, just as it's coming out of winter. So it looks like nothing's happening,
but
right?
underneath,
all the roots are growing.
So much is happening.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the weather gets warm, and in like a week or two, all of a sudden, the leaf is like full leaf, and you're like, it looked like it was dead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah. And then also it's like, pa-chow! Right? It's the same, but all this was happening underneath. And that's the thing about the death space. It's all happening, even if you're not aware of it, but it's there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful images. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
For those of you who are new, we're just about to start the GFC. This is the most important part of this episode because it's where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. So I invite you to settle in and get comfortable. You can sit, stand, or lie down, or if you prefer to walk around slowly, you could even do that too. If during the GFC you find that you start falling asleep, even if you didn't feel tired when you started, just let yourself drift off. That just means that the frequencies are really high and it's more efficient for you to be asleep to integrate them. If this happens, it's good to listen to the GFC portion again a few times until you can stay awake for the whole thing. That's how you'll know you've integrated those higher resonating frequencies. Because I'm working on the frequency level, these GFCs are not like regular meditations, and many people find they go into varying degrees of altered state. If you happen to be listening to the audio version of this episode, please definitely do not drive while listening to this. Okay, here we go.